Something happened last night that I still don't know how to explain. At first, I thought it was nothing, just an old envelope, just a piece of paper, just something forgotten in a place where forgotten things tend to disappear forever. But then I saw the name written across the front, your name, and underneath it were 4 words that made my hands go completely still. Read this before tomorrow. I almost threw it away. I thought maybe it was some strange coincidence, some old message that had somehow found its way into the wrong hands. But something about that envelope felt different. Maybe it was the handwriting. Maybe it was the date. Or maybe it was the fact that whoever wrote it seemed to know that one day, somehow, you would be the person reading it. The letter had been hidden for a long time, long enough for the paper to become soft around the edges, long enough for the ink to fade slightly, long enough for the person who wrote it to become a memory, but the message itself was still there. And last night, when I finally unfolded the paper, I realized that this wasn't an ordinary love letter. It was a goodbye. Not the kind of goodbye people say when they're angry, not the kind people say because they stopped caring. It was the kind of goodbye someone writes when they love another person so deeply that they know they may never get another chance to say what they should have said while they still had time. The first line said, "If you are reading this, then I wasn't brave enough to tell you everything when I had the chance." I stopped there. I read it again, and again, because suddenly, the room didn't feel quiet anymore. It felt like someone was standing beside me, someone who had been waiting for years to be heard. The letter continued, "I don't know when you'll find this. I don't know where you'll be when you read it. I don't know whether you'll be alone or surrounded by people. I don't even know if you'll remember me the way I remember you. But there is something I need you to understand. You were never just another person in my life. You were the person who changed the meaning of my life." I had to put the letter down, because there are some words that don't simply reach your eyes. They reach somewhere deeper, somewhere you don't expect. The writer talked about the first time they saw you. They remembered things you probably never realized anyone noticed. The way you looked away when you were nervous. The little pause before you answered difficult questions. The way you tried to make other people laugh even when you weren't having the best day yourself. They remembered. The moments you thought nobody noticed. And then came the sentence that made me understand why this letter had been kept hidden for so long. "You probably never knew how many times I almost told you." Almost. That word appeared again and again. I almost called. I almost came back. I almost said the truth. I almost told you I loved you. I almost asked you to stay. I almost admitted that losing you was the one thing I was afraid of, and then, but life has a strange way of turning almost into never. Think about that for a moment. How many things in our lives are built from almost calling someone, almost sending the message, almost taking the chance, almost saying I love you, almost saying I'm sorry. Almost saying please don't go. We assume there will always be another day, another opportunity, another conversation, another chance to explain. But sometimes tomorrow arrives carrying a completely different story than the one we expected. The letter said that the writer had spent years wondering whether meeting you had been a coincidence. they eventually decided it wasn't, not because everything between you was easy. It wasn't. There were misunderstandings. There were silences. There were moments when pride became louder than love. There were moments when fear convinced both people to walk in opposite directions, but the writer said something I haven't been able to forget: real love isn't always the person who stays. Sometimes real love is the person who changes you so completely that you are never the same after they leave. Then the letter became more personal. They wrote about a particular evening, a night when you were together, talking about things that seemed ordinary at the time. The conversation had wandered from childhood memories to dreams about the future. You talked about where you wanted to go, what you wanted to become, what kind of life you imagined. The writer remembered every detail, and then they admitted something. While you were talking about the future, they were secretly imagining themselves in it. They didn't tell you. They smiled. They listened. They pretended everything was normal. But inside, they were thinking, what if this is the person I've been waiting for? Maybe that's what makes certain memories so powerful. We don't realize they're important while they're happening. We only understand their value after they've become memories. The letter continued, I wanted to build a life with you. I wanted ordinary mornings. I wanted arguments about stupid things. I wanted grocery store conversations. I wanted to hear you complain about something that didn't really matter. I wanted birthdays, holidays, rainy afternoons, boring Tuesdays, unexpected road trips, and all the little moments nobody writes songs about. I didn't need a perfect love story. I just wanted a real one. I stopped reading for a moment, because maybe that's what people misunderstand about love. They think love is supposed to feel like a movie, like every moment should be dramatic, like there should always be fireworks. But sometimes love is much quieter. Sometimes love is remembering how someone takes their coffee. Sometimes it is knowing when they need silence. Sometimes it is saving the last piece of something because you know they'll want it. Sometimes it is simply being there. And maybe the greatest love stories aren't made from extraordinary moments. Maybe they're made from thousands of ordinary ones that mattered because the right person was there. The writer then confessed their biggest regret. They said they were afraid, not afraid of loving you, afraid of losing you. They thought that if they never said everything, they could somehow protect themselves. They thought silence was safer than honesty. They thought there would always be time. And eventually, silence became a wall neither person knew how to climb. Then came the line that made me read the entire paragraph twice. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I left because I didn't know how to carry a love that scared me with its importance. Maybe you have experienced something like that. Maybe someone disappeared from your life and you spent months wondering why. Maybe you blamed yourself. Maybe you wondered what you did wrong. Maybe you replayed every conversation, searching for the moment when everything changed. And maybe you never received an explanation. The letter didn't give an easy explanation either. It simply said, please don't spend your life believing my silence meant you weren't enough. Those words felt almost painfully honest, because when someone leaves without explaining, we often create our own explanation, and our minds are rarely kind to us. We decide we weren't interesting enough, beautiful enough, successful enough, important enough. We convince ourselves that someone else's inability to stay must have been proof that something was wrong with us. But sometimes people leave because they are struggling with themselves. Sometimes people are afraid. Sometimes timing is cruel. Sometimes two people can love each other and still fail to understand how to build a life together. And sometimes the ending of a relationship is not a measurement of the value of either person. The letter said, "You were never the problem I was trying to escape. You were the truth I was afraid to face." Then the handwriting changed slightly. The next part looked as though it had been written much later, maybe after a long pause, maybe after tears, maybe after the writer had already accepted what was coming. "I know you may have moved on. I hope you have. I hope someone makes you laugh until your stomach hurts. I hope someone listens when you speak. I hope someone notices when you're pretending to be okay. I hope someone holds space for the dreams you haven't told anyone else. And I hope you never settle for a love that makes you question whether you matter." That part surprised me, because the letter wasn't asking you to come back. It wasn't demanding another chance. It wasn't saying, "Wait for me." It wasn't trying to control your future. Instead, it was giving you permission to live it. The writer understood that love doesn't give someone ownership over another person's life. And then came the final section, the section that explained why the letter had been marked with tomorrow's date. "I don't know what tomorrow will bring. None of us do. But if tomorrow is the day you finally read this, then let it be the day you stop carrying the questions I left behind." The writer wanted you to stop asking why. Why did they leave? Why didn't they say something? Why wasn't the timing different? Why couldn't things have worked? Why did it have to hurt? The letter said, "Some questions don't have answers that can heal you. Sometimes the answer is simply that we were human. We were young. We were scared. We made mistakes. We loved imperfectly. And that doesn't mean the love wasn't real." Then there was a final confession, a simple one, no dramatic language. No promises, just the truth. "If I could have one more moment with you, I wouldn't ask you to change anything. I wouldn't ask you to forgive everything. I wouldn't ask you to return to the past. I would simply look at you and say thank you. Thank you for entering my life. Thank you for showing me parts of myself I didn't know existed. Thank you for making ordinary days memorable. Thank you for giving me memories I will carry for the rest of my life. Thank you for loving me, even when I didn't know how to receive it. And thank you for teaching me that losing someone doesn't erase what they meant." Then the final paragraph began. "I loved you. I love the person you were. I love the person you became, and I hope I would have loved the person you are still becoming. But this is not a letter asking you to wait for me. It is not a letter asking you to look backward. It is a letter asking you to look forward. If you still have someone you love, tell them. If you owe someone an apology, give it. If you have a dream, take one step toward it. If someone brings peace into your life, don't take them for granted. And if you are waiting for permission to begin again, consider this your permission. Tomorrow is not promised, so don't spend today living inside yesterday." The letter ended there, no dramatic signature, just a name that meant something to you. Maybe more than you expected, and beneath it, one final sentence, wherever life takes us, a part of my heart will always be grateful that our paths crossed. I sat there for a long time after reading it. The room was completely silent, and I kept thinking about that sentence. Not I'll always be waiting. Not you'll never love anyone else. Not you belong to me. Just gratitude. Maybe that's the most mature form of love, the kind that doesn't demand possession, the kind that doesn't turn another person's future into a prison, the kind that can say, I loved you, I lost you, and I still want you to be happy. Maybe you were meant to find this message tonight. Not because some mysterious force has decided that a certain person must return to your life tomorrow, not because fate has guaranteed a reunion, but because sometimes we need a reminder that life is happening right now. You don't need to know who your soulmate is. You don't need to wait for a perfect sign. You don't need to spend another year wondering whether someone from your past will come back. You don't need to keep reopening an old wound just because the ending wasn't clear. Maybe the real message in that letter is simpler. Love while you have the chance. Speak while you still can. Forgive when forgiveness is healthy. Walk away when something continually harms you. Tell people what they mean to you. And don't assume tomorrow will give you everything today refuses to say. There is another part of the letter I almost missed. It was written along the bottom edge of the page in much smaller handwriting. It said, one day, you will realize that the person you were searching for was never supposed to complete you. They were supposed to meet you while you were becoming complete on your own. I think that may be the most important part, because a soulmate shouldn't be someone who makes your life valuable. Your life already has value. A meaningful relationship should add to your life, not become the only reason you believe your life matters. You should be able to stand on your own. You should be able to laugh on your own, dream on your own, grow on your own, and then, if someone comes along who wants to walk beside you, you can choose each other freely, not because you're incomplete without them, because together, you make something meaningful. So if you're reading this tonight and thinking about someone from your past, pause for a moment. Don't immediately text them. Don't chase them. Don't assume this story guarantees anything about what happens next. Instead, ask yourself a different question. What did that person teach you? What did you learn about yourself? What kind of love do you want now? What kind of person do you want to become? And what are you willing to stop accepting? Maybe the letter wasn't really about the person who wrote it. Maybe it was about the person reading it. Maybe it was about you. Maybe it was found because you needed to remember something you've forgotten. You are allowed to move forward. You are allowed to stop waiting. You are allowed to remember someone without returning to them. You are allowed to love again. You are allowed to become someone new. And you are allowed to believe that the best chapter of your life doesn't have to be behind you, because tomorrow is still unwritten. That means tomorrow can be different. You can wake up and make the phone call you've been avoiding. You can apologize. You can start the project. You can take the first step. You can tell someone you appreciate them. You can finally let go of a story that has been hurting you. You can choose peace. You can choose growth. You can choose yourself. And maybe somewhere, someone is carrying a letter they never sent. Maybe they regret something. Maybe they remember you. Maybe they wonder what would have happened if things had been different. But you don't have to spend your life trapped inside someone else's unfinished sentence. You get to write your own. So read that final line one more time, not as a prediction, not as a promise, but as a reminder. Don't spend today living inside yesterday. Because yesterday already happened. You cannot rewrite it. You cannot make someone say the words they never said. You cannot force a door to reopen. You cannot change the timing. But you can decide what happens next, and perhaps that is what the letter was really trying to give you. Not a reunion, not a prophecy, not a reason to wait, a beginning. The person who wrote those words may never get to see what you do with them. They may never know whether you found happiness. They may never know whether you finally stopped blaming yourself. But if they truly loved you, perhaps this is exactly what they would want: for you to live, for you to laugh, for you to grow, for you to love without fear. For you to wake up tomorrow and realize that your story did not end when someone walked away. It continued, it is continuing, and tomorrow, you get another page. So don't be afraid of that page. Write something beautiful on it. Not perfect, not extraordinary, just honest. Because sometimes the greatest love letter isn't the one someone leaves behind. Sometimes it's the life you choose to live after reading it. And if there is one thing you should carry with you from this strange discovery last night, let it be this: you don't have to wait for someone else to return before your life can begin. You don't have to receive an apology before you can heal. You don't need a final conversation before you can find peace. And you don't need a soulmate to prove that you are worthy of love. You are already worthy of it. The right people will recognize that. The right relationships will respect that. And the future will give you opportunities that the past never could. So if this letter found you at exactly the moment you needed it, don't spend the rest of tonight wondering whether someone is coming back. Ask yourself where you are going. Because perhaps the most important person you will meet tomorrow isn't someone from your past. Perhaps it is the version of yourself you've been waiting to become. And maybe, just maybe, that is the real message hidden inside the letter. Tomorrow isn't something you have to fear. Tomorrow is something you get to write. So close the letter, take a breath, look around at the life you still have, and remember the final words written beneath that fading signature. Whatever happens next, don't be afraid to love your life again. Then turn the page. Your story isn't over. It may only be beginning. But there was one thing about the letter that I hadn't noticed the first time. After I finished reading the final sentence, I folded the paper back along its original creases. That was when something slipped from inside the envelope. A second piece of paper, much smaller, almost completely hidden. For a moment, I just stared at it. There was no name on the outside. No date, no explanation, only one sentence written across the front: there is something I couldn't say in the first letter. I remember feeling my heart sink, because suddenly, the first letter didn't feel like the ending anymore. It felt like the beginning of a much deeper story. I unfolded the second page carefully. The handwriting was the same. But this time, the words began differently. I lied when I said I was ready to let you go. That sentence changed everything. The writer explained that they had spent years pretending they had accepted the ending. They told friends they were fine. They smiled when people asked about the past. They learned how to talk about you without letting their voice change. They convinced themselves that moving forward meant forgetting, but they hadn't forgotten, not really. They remembered the smallest things, a song playing somewhere unexpectedly, a familiar street, a certain season, the smell of rain, a particular kind of coffee, a phrase you used to say, a place you once visited together. Memories have a strange way of surviving. You can forget an entire conversation and still remember the feeling of someone's presence. You can forget what someone was wearing but remember exactly how safe you felt beside them. You can forget the date something happened but remember the sound of their laugh. And the writer said that was the hardest part. I learned that forgetting someone isn't the same thing as healing from them. Then came a confession. I spent a long time thinking healing meant reaching the day when I wouldn't miss you anymore. I was wrong. Healing meant reaching the day when I could miss you without needing you to come back. That sentence stayed with me, because maybe that's what people don't tell us about letting go. Letting go doesn't always mean the memories disappear. Sometimes letting go means the memories stop controlling you. You can remember someone and still continue.